Introduction to Dreamland by Bhagat Singh. My noble friend L. Ramsaran Das has, has asked me to write an introduction to his poetical work, The Dreamland. I am neither a poet nor a literature. Neither am I a journalist nor a critic. Hence, by no stretch of imagination can I find the justification of the demand. But the circumstances in which I am placed, I do not afford any opportunity of discussing the question with the author back and forth, and thereby do not leave me any alternative but to comply with the desire of my friend. As I am not a poet, I am not going to discuss it from that point of view. I am I have absolutely no knowledge of meter and do not even know whether judged from a metrical standard it would be correct, not being literature. I am not going to discuss it with the view of assigning to its right place in the national literature. I, being a political worker, can at, at most discuss it only from that point of view. But here also one factor is making my work practically impossible or at least very difficult. As a rule, the introduction is always written by a man who is at one with the author on the contents of the work. But here, the case is quite different. I do not see eye to eye with my friend on all matters. He was aware of the fact that I differed from him on many vital points. Therefore, my writing is not going to be an introduction at all. It can at the utmost amount to a criticism, and its place will be at the end and not in the beginning of the book. In the political field, the Dreamland occupies a very important place. In the prevailing circumstance, it is filling a very important gap in the movement. As a matter of fact, all political movements of our country that have hitherto played an important role in our modern history had been lacking the ideal at the achievement of which they aimed. Revolutionary movement is no exception. In spite of all my efforts, I could not find any revolutionary party that had clear ideas as to what they were fighting for, with the exception of the Gadar party, having been inspired by USA form of government, clearly stated that they wanted to replace the existing government by a republican form of government. All other parties consisted of men who had but one idea, that is to fight against the alien rulers. The idea That idea is quite laudable, but cannot be termed a revolutionary idea. We must make it clear that revolution does not merely mean the upheaval or sanguinary strife. Revolutionary revolutionary revolution necessarily implies the program of systematic reconstruction of society on new and better adapted basis. After complete destruction of the existing state of affairs, that is, the regime. In the political field, the Liberals wanted some reform under the present government, while the extremists demanded a bit more and were prepared to employ radical means for the same purpose. Among uh, among the revolutionaries, they had always been in the favor of extreme methods, with one idea, that is to overthrow the foreign domination. No doubt, there had been some who were in favor of extorting some reforms through those means. All these movements cannot be rightly cannot rightly be designated as a revolutionary movement. But L. Ram Saran Das is the first revolutionary recruited formally in the Punjab by a Bengali absconder, absconder in 1908. Since then, he had been in touch with the revolutionary movements and finally joined the Kada party, but retaining his old ideas that people held about the ideal of their movement. It it has another interesting fact to add to to its beauty and value. L. Ramsaran Das was sentenced to death in 1915, and sentence was later commuted to life transportation. Today, sitting in the condemned cells myself, I can let the readers know as authoritatively that the life imprisonment is comparatively a far harder lot than that of death. L. Ramcharan Das had actually to undergo 14 years of imprisonment. It was in some southern jail that he wrote this poetry. The dense psychology and mental struggle that of the author has stamped the impressions upon the poetry and makes it all the more beautiful and interesting. He had been struggling hard against some depressing mood before he decided to write. In the days when many of his comrades had not had been let off on undertakings, and the temptation had been very strong for everyone and for him too, and when the sweet and painful memories of wife and children had added more to work. Hence, we find the sudden outburst in the opening paragraph. Wife, children, friends that me surround, were poisonous snakes all around. He discusses philosophy in the beginning. The philosophy is the backbone of all revolutionary movement of Bengal, as well as of the Punjab. I differ from him on this point very widely. His interpretation of the universe is teleological and metaphysical, which I am a materialist, and my interpretation of the phenomenon would be casual, nevertheless, would be causal. My interpretation of the phenomenon would be causal, nevertheless, it is by no means out of place or out of date. The general idea that are prevailing in our country are more in accordance with those expressed by him. To fight that depressing mood, he resorted to prayers, as it is evident that the whole of the beginning of the book is devoted to God. His praise, his definition, belief in God is the outcome of mysticism, which is the natural consequence of depression. The word, the world is Maya or Mithya, a dream or a fiction, is clear mysticism, which has originated and developed by Hindu sages of old ages such as Shankaracharya and others. But in the materialist philosophy, this mode of thinking has got absolutely no place. But this mysticism of thinking has got absolute but this mysticism of the author is by no means ignoble or deplorable. It has its of them, a very own of them are doing very productive labor. The only difference that the socialist society expects is that the mental workers shall no longer be regarded superior to the manual workers. L. Ramsaran Das' idea about free education is really worth considering, and socialist government has adopted somewhat the same course in Russia. His discussion about crime is really the most advanced school of thought. Crime is the most serious social problem which needs to be which needs a very tactful treatment. He has been in jail for the better part of his life. He has got the practical experience. At one place, he employs the typical jail terms: the light labor, the medium labor, and the hard labor, etc. Like other socialists, he suggests that instead of retribution, that is retaliation, the reformative theory should form the basis of punishment. Not to punish, but to reclaim should be the guiding principle of the administration of justice. Jails should be reformatories and not veritable hills. Sorry, veritable hills. In this connection, the reader should study the Russian prison system. While dealing with militia, he discusses war as well. In my opinion, war as an institution shall only occupy a few pages in the encyclopedia. Then, and war materials shall adorn no conflicting or diverse interests that cause war. At the utmost, we can say that war shall have to be retained as an institution for the transactional period. Transitional, sorry, for the transitional period, we can easily understand if we take example of present day Russia. There is the dictatorship of prole- proletariat at present. They want to establish a socialist society. Meanwhile, they have to maintain an army to defend themselves against the capitalist society. But the war aims would be different. Imperialist designs um, shall no more accusate our dreamland people to wage wars. There shall be no more trophies. The revolutionary armies shall march to other lands, not to rural rulers down from their thrones, and stop the blood-sucking exploitation and thus liberate the toiling masses. But there shall not be there shall not be the primitive national or racial hatred uh, to goad our men to fight. World Federation is the most popular and immediate object of all the free thinking people, and the author has well dilated on the subject, uh, and his criticism of so called League of Nations is beautiful. In a footnote under stanza 571, ब्रैकेट में है 572, the author touches, though briefly, the question of methods. He says such a kingdom cannot be brought about by physical violent revolutions. It cannot be forced upon the society from without, it must grow from within. This can be brought about by the gradual process of evolution, by educating the masses on the lines mentioned above, etc. The statement does not in itself contain any despondency. It is quite correct, but having not been itself, having not been fully explained, is liable to create some misunderstanding or worse, still a confusion. Does it mean that L. Ramcharan Das has realized the futility of the cult force? Has he become an orthodox believer in non-violence? No, it does not mean that. Let me explain what the above quoted statements amount to. The revolutionaries know better than anybody else that the socialist society cannot be brought about by violent means, but that is that it should grow and evolve from within. The author suggests that education is the author suggests education as the only weapon to be employed, but everybody can easily realize that the present government here, or as a matter of fact, all the capitalist governments are not going to help any effort, but on the contrary, suppress it mercilessly. Then what will his evolution achieve? We, the revolutionaries, are striving to capture power in our hands and to organize a revolutionary government which should employ all its resources for mass education as is being done in Russia today. After capturing power, peaceful methods shall be employed for constructive work. Force shall be employed to crush obstacles if that is what the author means. Then we are at one, and I am confident and that it is exactly this what he means. I have discussed the book at great length. I have rather criticized it, but I am not going to ask my ask any alteration in it because it because this has got its historical values. These were the ideas of the 1914 and 15 revolutionaries. I strongly recommend this book to young men in particular, but with a warning. Please do not read it or follow blindly and take for granted what is written. Read it, criticize it, think it over, try to formulate your own ideas with its help. This is the end of Introduction to Dreamland by Bhagat Singh. Thank you for listening.